What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so basically we are going to continue our coverage over the Squadron Supreme. Now remember, when it comes to the Squadron Supreme, they have been around for almost forever, because when it came to Marvel Comics, they had an idea, said, what would happen if the Justice League actually fought against the Avengers? The problem was, though, Marvel couldn't use the Justice League because they belong to DC Comics. And so what Marvel did was, you have Marvel say, okay, cool, what if we use our multiverse? And by using our multiverse, we can say in a different universe, there are characters who basically represent the Justice League, but they don't hold their names. They have different names, different origins, and of course, DC can't say we copyright it or anything at all. We can avoid a lawsuit. And so you had the Squadron Supreme, and they came from an alternate universe, and their characters represent the Justice League. Like Hyperion, it's just Superman. Now, with that being said, though, of course, with the Squadron Supreme being around for years and years and years and years, of course you had Marvel do a lot of reworking with the characters. And sometimes you will have alternate versions of the Squadron Supreme from the multiverse. So it's not just like, hey, there's just one universe and that is it. You have a lot of universes out there that basically have a Squadron Supreme. And we only seen a few of them over the years in Marvel Comics. Now, in the early 2000s, which right now we are covering when it comes to the Squadron Supreme, Marvel launched Marvel Max. And Marvel Max was a way for Marvel to say, okay, let's try to do more adult comics. And adult comics was a way for Marvel to do more adult comics with Marvel Max. And so they said, okay, we had a few good series so far. Let's go ahead and do the Squadron Supreme. And the Squadron Supreme got a brand new comic book series written by JMS, the same guy who wrote Spider-Man, around that time to say, rework the Squadron Supreme. They can be a different version, but either way, we work them. Give us an origin for some of these characters. Tell a new origin for some of these characters. And so that is what JMS actually did when it came to the Squadron Supreme. We got this series right here, Supreme Power. Now, we covered the first 3 issues, which of course gave us the origin of Hyperion. But with Hyperion now being on Earth for a good period of time, you now have other characters popping up left and right. And we saw some of those characters in the last video, like Dr. Spectrum or Blur. But now you have other characters popping up, and you have the team actually coming together slowly. And so now we're seeing the formation of the Squadron Supreme. But of course, this team does take place from a different universe, not the main Marvel universe. Because you have to remember, when it came to the Squadron Supreme, they're usually kind of like a government team. And so, of course, with them being a government team, they kind of run differently. They work differently. And also, they want to kind of keep this team away from the main DC universe. The main Marvel universe. Sorry there. But they want to keep them away so that there's no interference between the Avengers and this team just yet, because they want to kind of rework these characters, have it on their own Earth, so they can tell some different stories without the idea of involving Spider-Man or Iron Man or Captain America. They do their own thing with these characters over there, but also away from the other Marvel characters. Now, when we actually jump into today's video storyline, we actually pick up with Hyperion. Now remember, by this point, Hyperion was a hero. Like, he was announced to the world. The world knows who Hyperion is. Now, of course, they're scared of him, and of course, they're wondering how dangerous he could be, but at the same time, he's still being a hero. Now, you have to remember, Hyperion's origin is very similar to Superman in some aspects, where, of course, he did crash on Earth. He was found by humans, except right after he was found, the American government came in and said, nope, that's our child now, because he is an alien and we have no idea what he could possibly do. And so they kept the child over the years and basically been feeding him the American lifestyle and gave him fake parents to watch over him. And of course, they gave him a name and they called him Mark Milton. Now, with all that being said, while you have Hyperion right now saving a plane from falling out of the sky, you do have the fake parents of Mark Milton meeting up with the general. Now, this is actually very important because we saw in our last video, even though these parents were basically hired to help raise Mark Milton in a bubble space, these people never did like him. They were scared of him. Like, you would think, okay, you've been assigned to watch a kid and there is a possibility that you might actually fall in love being that kid parent, even though you're not their parent. These people right here, they never did like Mark Milton. And the reason why, because he was so scary and dangerous. With all the different powers that he could basically do, it freaked them out. And they're very happy about the idea that they're going to fake their death so that they can escape, but also make sure that Mark Milton falls in line. Because right now, they want him to be their super soldier. And to make sure he falls in line, let's pretend we killed the fake parents that he has no idea are not his real parents, and also kind of get them out of there before he possibly kills them, because he is a very dangerous person. And so they're going to fake the parents' death to just keep Mark Milton under their control. But then we actually pick up with Kyle Richmond. Now remember, Kyle Richmond, we saw him earlier in our last video. And matter of fact, the last time we actually saw him was when he was with his parents. And of course, his parents were shot and killed by a racist person. Because of course, Kyle Richmond is a black person and his parents were also black. Now, with that being said, of course, his origin is Bruce Wayne's origin, just a little bit different. Where Bruce Wayne parents were killed for a completely different reason, Kyle Richmond parents were killed because the guy who killed them was a racist. Now, with that being said, Kyle Richmond origin is kind of like Bruce Wayne, where of course Kyle Richmond parents had money. And so when they died, all that money went straight to Kyle Richmond. And of course, he began to use that money for his night activities. And of course, his night activities is him being a superhero. Now, he called himself Nighthawk, and it's him going around being a hero who basically protects the area he lives in. Now, here's the thing though. Nighthawk is brutal. And when I say brutal, I mean literally brutal, because you have Nighthawk just really kill a bunch of thugs off who were going after a random woman. Now, we have no idea what they're going to do to that woman, but you do have Nighthawk just brutally beat them down or possibly kill them. And of course, I honestly can't show it because it's YouTube, and Marvel Max had a lot of content that was very adult content. So to keep the channel safe, I'm not going to show what he does to those thugs. Let's just say it was very brutal and nasty. Now that is the moment where we actually do jump over to Mark Milton, his parents, and also the general. And right now you have the general beginning the process of actually removing Mark Milton's parents. Because remember, they want to make sure that Mark Milton basically falls in line with the American government. And to make sure that actually happens, they're going to remove his parents, say that they basically had died. And so what they're going to do is they're going to send Mark Milton on a mission. And of course, the mission is to find the Blur. Because remember, in our last video, we got word that technically right now in the south part of America, somebody has been running around at super speed. But of course, they have no idea who that person is. And so they're going to send Mark Milton down there to hopefully figure out what's happening down there. Because Mark Milton does have super speed, he might be able to go toe to toe with this speedster and to hopefully bring him in to figure out if he's good or is he bad. Now, of course, while you have Mark Milton getting the mission and he does leave, that is the moment you do have the general say, okay, it's time for you guys to go ahead, pack everything up and get the heck out of here. And so while Mark is down in the south part of America looking for a speedster, We're going to remove you guys and send you guys to a completely different country away from Mark, and hopefully he never finds you down the road. Now, you do have Mark being able to actually find Blur. Here's the thing though. Blur is technically faster than Mark Milton. He's able to turn on a quick turn so easily, and Mark is not able to actually do it. But right after you have Mark being able to make contact with the Blur, you have Mark realize, oh my God, there are other people out there who are just like me. People with powers. And for Mark, this is great because it is something he always wanted, well, since our last video, to find other people who are like him, super power beings. But of course, after he does lose the Blur, you do have the army appear, and they're kind of like, hey man, we got some bad news for you. It's about your parents. Now, this is really a messed up thing. And what I mean by that is you do have the army say there was an accident, that basically something happened to your parents. Now, originally, Mark Milton was supposed to go out on a boating trip with his dad, his fake dad, and his fake mom, really his fake dad, but the mom wanted to tag along. Now, of course, that was all fake, but they're trying to play along. Now, this is the army saying like, hey, listen, your parents, they died in the boating accident. Like, they want to go on that boating trip so bad. Your dad went out there with your mom instead of you, and there was an accident, and they both died. Like, and we can't find their bodies anywhere. Now, you do have Mark actually go out into the ocean to look for the bodies of his supposed dead parents. And of course, he can't find the dead bodies because right now they're in a completely different country. Now, this is really messed up because, yes, you now have Mark believing that he no longer has parents so that he can fall in line with the American government. Cool. You got that plan right there going. But here's the thing. If Mark Milton is able to detect his parents' heartbeats down the road in future books, it is going to lead into bigger problems for the government when Mark gets very angry and finds out that the government had faked his parents' death. Now, as we get into the second chapter, I do want to point out, like, remember, when it comes to Hyperion, he basically represents Superman, but in the Marvel multiverse landscape. Now, with that being said, though, you do have Hyperion right now being moved to a new house, a new apartment, really a penthouse, because with the death of his parents, it's the American government trying to move him away from that bubble that he was in and now put him actually in the city. Now, this is Hyperion kind of want to be like Clark Kent, meaning that he wants to have dual identities, one when he is Hyperion and one when he is Mark Milton, but of course keep them separate from one another, like how you had Clark Kent and you have Superman, where the world does not know about Mark Milton's side, but they do know about Hyperion. He wants to have a normal life and have a normal job. But you do have the government say, you can't have that because you basically been told to the world that you are Mark Milton, that you are Hyperion. The world knows who you are. So honestly, you can't hide from the world. And also, you have a job. It's called being a hero. And so for Mark Milton, he can't believe that basically he was put in that position now. He's kind of like, I can never have a normal life or have actual friends who could be just like me. It's him wondering, will he ever have a normal life like humans do on Earth? Now, we actually do jump over to Joseph Ledger. Now, remember, Joseph Ledger was basically a soldier that was brought in by the American government to work on a project. And that project was a crystal that was the power source of the spaceship that brought Hyperion to Earth. Now, of course, you did have the American government test that crystal, and they realized that the crystal had the ability to respond to people's thoughts and do different things. The problem was, though, every single person that had been tested on with the crystal, well, bad things happened. And so they brought in Joseph Ledger because, well, he is a great soldier, and maybe he'll be able to control the crystal. Now, when he began to touch the crystal, he was able to do a lot of different things. The problem was, though, the more times he used it, the more pain he felt from the crystal. And then the crystal basically embedded in his hand, and then he was put in a coma. and he has been in a coma ever since. Now, right now, you do have some doctors transporting him to a different laboratory. The problem is, though, when one of the doctors touched the crystal that's inside his hand right now, there's a huge flash. And with that huge flash, that doctor actually turns into dust, really, or some kind of husk. Either way, that doctor is officially dead. And now you have the other doctor and the driver kind of wondering what just happened with John Ledger. Because right now, this man just turned this dude into dust. What's going on with that crystal? And this began the process of him becoming Dr. Spectrum. Now, we actually jump over to two guys in black suits right now going to a particular house. Now, these two guys do look like they could be agents for the American government, but they're not. Actually, these are two guys who are going to do something different than what the American government is actually doing. Because when it comes to supreme power, the idea of the storyline is that these are characters who are appearing in today's world, our world. So what would happen if these characters actually appeared in our world? That is the big question. And so right now you do have these two guys going to a house. And of course, this house belongs to Blur's mother. And of course, these guys found out who Blur was and was able to find out where he lives. And so they're coming to his house not to recruit him to the American government program. Instead, they want to sponsor him, to endorse him, to give him a lot of money to run around with endorsements all over him because he is a speedster. He could be a hero down the road. And if these companies are able to put their names on his shirt, jacket, whatever, as he goes around to save the day, then of course he will get that money. It's a way for him to get paid because he has powers and he can be a hero. He is somebody else who's now coming out to the world like Hyperion did. Because right now the world only knows about Hyperion. But if Blur comes out, that will be completely different because Hyperion is with the American government. Blur is not. Blur has more freedom. Blur will be able to make more money than Hyperion could possibly. And so right now, you have these two guys coming to Blur saying like, hey, we'll be your agents. We'll help you get some money, make some money. You'll be taken care of, and so will your mom. And you have Blur like, I'm down. Let's do it. Go ahead, sign me up. Let's go out there and make some money. Now we actually jump back over to Joseph Ledger. And yes, he's still in a coma, even though what happened earlier in this book, he's still in a coma. Now, of course, he was transported over to a facility that's being run by the American government. And of course, they do have a laboratory inside this facility to run some tests on Joseph Ledger because they have no idea what in the world actually happened when that doctor had touched the hand of Joseph Ledger. I mean, they do know they found a dead body, but they have no idea what basically set off the crystal. And so the doctor in charge, William Steedman, is trying to figure out what could possibly set the crystal off. Is Joseph actually awake inside his coma? Now, here's the thing. You do have William say, what if we basically put Joseph near the spaceship that brought Hyperion to Earth? Now, the reason why he's saying this because remember, the crystal that's right now embedded in the body of Joseph Ledger was originally the power source to Hyperion's spaceship that brought Hyperion to Earth. And so they're wondering if there could be some kind of connection between the spaceship and also the crystal right now that could basically wake up Joseph Ledger. Now, at first, nothing happens. And the reason why, because they have a spaceship in some kind of containment, where of course it's being contained in some kind of lead container. And really, you have the general say, take it out of the container. We should have a clear path of connection between the crystal and the spaceship because we're trying to bring our best soldier back to us. So go ahead, remove the container and let there be a clear connection between the two things. And as soon as the scientists did that, bam, Joseph Ledger woke up. And when he wakes up, it's huge. There's a huge flash and then he just flies right out of the building. And you have William and every other scientist like, What just happened? Now, right after Joseph Ledger left, of course, the general also saw it as well. But as soon as Joseph Ledger left, that is the moment you have the general get another call. Now, this call is talking about what just happened in a different part of the country. And of course, it's the south part of the country. And we definitely know what character is in the south part of America right now, and that is Blur. And remember, earlier, Blur did agree to kind of work with some agents to get some sponsorship to make some money. And so you have the general getting a call saying, okay, so we have Hyperion and we have Joseph Ledger, but there is a third guy who just came public, and he was our speedster down the south, and he's now famous because he has agents and he has sponsors. Like, he's out there in the world. He came public. And the general is not happy about this because he wanted a speedster under his control, but also the idea that now the public could possibly wonder if there is other characters out there who have abilities like these two guys do. Now, with Blur going public to the entire planet, that word got right back over to Hyperion. And this is great for Hyperion because Hyperion was looking for somebody who is just like him, somebody that he'll be able to actually connect with because they are both superpower beings. And so with that being said, you right now have Hyperion coming to Blur's press conference. Now, Hyperion does fly by really fast so that nobody can actually see Hyperion except Blur. Hyperion knew Blur will be able to actually see him and hear him to give a message over to Blur and say, meet me somewhere down the road, whatever, in 1 hour, because I know you can hear me and see me, and we have to talk because you and I, we're alike. We're both superpower beings. And so you have Blur continue on with the press conference like nothing happened, but Blur knows that Hyperion said, I want to see you and talk to you and hopefully connect with you. Now, I really do like the conversation between Blur and Hyperion. And the reason why, because it's Blur really trying to build a connection with Hyperion, but to also kind of give advice to Hyperion as well. Now, you would think that basically with Hyperion being the first hero and being a hero much longer than Blur has, that it would be Hyperion kind of giving advice to Blur. But in reality, Blur is, because Blur still had a normal upbringing. Hyperion did not. And matter of fact, the American government has not really been truthful about the origin of Hyperion to Hyperion. We know his origin, but not Hyperion. And so right now you have Blur kind of like, okay, listen, it's great that you and I both have powers, but what do you do for fun? What is your hobby? Now, at first, when he asked Hyperion, what do? You have Hyperion talk about being a hero and what he did today as a hero. But you have Blur say, no, none of that hero stuff. I'm asking you, what did you do for fun? Like for a hobby, to get out there, to relax. What helps you relax? And for Hyperion, he's kind of like, I don't know how to answer that, because basically he does not have a hobby, because the American government has just been pushing an agenda on Hyperion and making him do whatever they want him to do. And so he never had a time to actually find a hobby. And so this is Blur saying, find a hobby. Find one, get one, whatever, but you need one. It will help you relax, because this life right here we live, it's going to affect us down the road. And we need some kind of release for our stress, for our mental health. So find a hobby. By the way, let's stay in contact, because it's just you and I right now. And honestly, it's cool to have someone out there who's just like me. Now, you did have Blur tell Hyperion about Nighthawk, a character we have been seeing in both videos right now in Chicago. And so this is Blur saying, go to Chicago. Go there and you might find somebody else who could be like us, but I heard that he is just a myth. And honestly, that right there shows how very similar Nighthawk is to Batman. But getting back over to William Steedman, we do see William right now looking over the spaceship with another scientist, because this spaceship has caused a lot of different problems for the American government. And of course, it had brought up a lot of different questions. But right now, you have William wondering something else about the spaceship. And right now, you have a scientist tell William they have found small containers inside a spaceship. But these containers are very small and empty. But of course, they're just small enough to hold a bacteria or a virus. But of course, that spaceship was holding these containers, and most of those containers are empty now. And so now you have this scientist telling William there could be a chance that that virus went airborne. It was spread across the world. And of course, they have no idea if that virus is actually affecting people at the moment. And that is huge. But then we see that William goes home for the night. Now, when he does go home for the night, of course, this is William thinking, okay, I'm going to finally have a night to relax and take my mind off things. The problem is, though, as soon as he gets home, gets in bed and thinking it's going to be a relaxing night, well, that is the moment he's confronted by Joseph Ledger. And this is huge because at this point, it has been some time since Joseph Ledger was last seen after he had woke up from his coma and just flew away. And so this is William shocked to see Joseph Ledger right now standing in front of him like, oh my God, you're back. Like, you're here. Like, oh my gosh, where have you been? But Joseph Ledger is talking crazy to the idea that he wants to kill off William Steedman. And you have William like, what'd I do wrong? Like, we were trying to help you. You have to understand that. But you have Joseph like, no, look at what you did to me. You changed me, and now I have all the power I need to go ahead and kill you off. And this is huge because this is Joseph Ledger actually talking about killing off William. But then something snaps in the mind of Joseph Ledger. It's like he has split personalities because that is the moment he turns into somebody else, like he's the most calmest person in the world. And then he talks to William like, hey, what's up, Will? What's happening? Why are you scared? What happened? I just woke up. Where were you at? Like, he is completely a different person. And then you have Joseph put William down. But this shows William, okay, something else just happened to Joseph. He came out of his coma, but now it seems like there are two different personalities in there. That right there is scary. Now, we actually do pick up with Hyperion. Now, you do have Hyperion actually go to Chicago because remember, he was told about a hero known as Nighthawk who could have powers, not have powers, but Blur has no idea about Nighthawk. And so you have Hyperion go to Chicago. Now, when he gets there, he does find Nighthawk. And he tells us in Nighthawk that he has been watching Nighthawk for a couple hours tonight. But then he realized something about Nighthawk. That Nighthawk is just a regular guy. And we already knew that because Nighthawk basically represents Batman in these comics. But on top of that, this is Hyperion saying, but I realize you only protect African Americans and blacks. Why is that? Like, why don't you protect Caucasians or Asians or Mexicans or Latin people? Like, why only African Americans? Now, we know why. Because Nighthawk is just like Bruce Wayne. His parents were killed, except Nighthawk's parents were killed because they were black. They were killed off by a racist. And so it's Nighthawk going out of his way to protect his people. And so this is Hyperion kind of like, what you're doing is great, but you're staying in one particular circle. Why not go outside your circle and help all races? Now, while Hyperion is talking to Nighthawk, you have Nighthawk kind of looking at Hyperion as what he believes Hyperion to be. Some country racist Caucasian dude, or some guy who's part of the KKK. Like, he looks at Hyperion at different angles and what he thinks Hyperion actually stands for. And so you have Hyperion leave with a message like, hey, I feel like you're blinded by what your calling truly is. Like right now, you need to realize everybody needs help. And you have Hyperion fly away. But for Nighthawk, he's kind of like, no, what I'm doing is right. Protecting my people first. And that is who I'm going to protect. And that is it. But to go ahead and wrap up today's video, we actually pick up with William Steedman and also Joseph Ledger. And right now they're at a laboratory. And they're right now kind of keeping Joseph in this laboratory to run some tests on him. And you still have Joseph talking like he did earlier after that brief moment where his mind just snapped back to normal. And so while they're talking, you have Joseph still continuing to talk like a normal person does. But then after William leaves, you have William talk to another scientist and say, I'm worried for Joseph Ledger, because when he reappeared, he was talking and acting completely different than he is right now. And so this is William saying, I feel like with the crystal being embedded inside the body of Joseph Ledger, the crystal has taken on its own personality in the mind of Joseph Ledger. And so, yes, he does have multiple personalities inside his mind right now, but one of those personalities belongs to the crystal. Now, this is only the idea that William has. But of course, it could actually mean something huge down the road. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.